Maya Chen stood 5 feet 2 inches in her combat boots, her frame barely casting a shadow against the towering concrete walls of Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. The drill instructors called her Pocket, not as a term of endearment, but as a cruel reminder that she didn't belong. While her male counterparts loomed over her like giants, their broad shoulders filling out their fatigues with military precision, Maya looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong classroom. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her delicate features and slight build drew snickers from the other candidates, whispered comments about how someone's little sister must have gotten lost on base. But behind those dark eyes burned something the instructors hadn't seen before. Something that would soon rewrite every assumption they held about what a Navy SEAL could be. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Center as basic underwater demolition school class 247 assembled for their first day of Hell Week. 23 candidates stood in formation, their freshly issued fatigues crisp and unworn, their faces a mixture of determination and barely concealed terror. Among them, Maya Chen looked impossibly small, her gear hanging loose on her petite frame, despite the tailoring attempts of the supply sergeant. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez paced before the formation, his weathered face a map of 2 decades in the teams. His steel-gray eyes swept across the candidates with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up prey. When his stare landed on Maya, his expression shifted from professional assessment to barely disguised disgust. "Well, well," Rodriguez growled, his voice carrying across the compound like a thunderclap. "Looks like somebody's daughter took a wrong turn on her way to cheerleading practice." The other instructors, a collection of battle-hardened warriors with combat ribbons decorating their chests, erupted in laughter. Chief Williams, a mountain of a man whose biceps strained against his instructor's shirt, slapped his knee and pointed at Maya. "Chief, I think she's looking for the Girl Scouts meeting," Williams called out, his Brooklyn accent thick with mockery. "Cookie sales are probably down the street." The candidates around Maya shifted uncomfortably, some fighting to suppress their own smirks while others stared straight ahead, grateful that the attention wasn't focused on them. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her bearing, eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the horizon. She had expected this. Growing up as the smallest kid in every class, the last one picked for every team, the one teachers looked past when choosing classroom helpers, she had learned to armor herself with silence and determination. But here, in this testosterone-soaked crucible where weakness was a death sentence, the stakes felt infinitely higher. Instructor Chief Petty Officer David Thompson, a lean man with predatory eyes and a reputation for breaking candidates' spirits before their bodies gave out, stepped closer to Maya. His breath reeked of coffee in Copenhagen as he leaned down to speak directly into her ear. "Listen here, Princess," Thompson hissed, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the venom of a cobra. "This isn't some feel-good movie where the underdog wins against all odds. This is real life, and in real life, little girls who play soldier get good men killed." He straightened up and addressed the entire formation, his voice now booming across the compound. "In case any of you forgot, we're training the most elite warriors on the planet. Not social experiments, not diversity initiatives, warriors." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya felt the weight of every stare, the burden of representing not just herself, but every woman who had ever been told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, tough enough. The other candidates began to shuffle nervously, the tension building like pressure in a diving bell. Petty Officer First Class Angela Martinez, the only female instructor in the program, watched from the sidelines with a carefully neutral expression. She had fought her own battles to get where she was, facing discrimination and harassment, that would have broken lesser spirits. But even she shook her head slightly as she observed Maya's diminutive frame next to the other candidates. Some battles, she thought, weren't worth fighting. The compound itself seemed to mock Maya's presence. Every piece of equipment, from the obstacle course logs to the boat paddles, had been designed for men significantly larger than her. The pull-up bars hung at a height that forced her to jump just to reach them. The life rafts they would carry during Hell Week weighed nearly as much as she did. Even the mess hall trays seemed comically oversized in her small hands. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, the program's chief psychologist, observed the proceedings from her office window with growing concern. In her 15 years of evaluating SEAL candidates, she had seen the program break men who seemed invincible. The psychological pressure was often more devastating than the physical demands. Candidates would quit not because their bodies failed them, but because their minds convinced them they didn't belong. And Maya, despite her impressive scores on the preliminary fitness tests, was already facing a level of scrutiny and hostility that would have cracked most recruits before training even began. The other candidates came from predictable backgrounds. Jake Morrison, a former college football player from Alabama whose father and grandfather had both been SEALs, stood 6 feet 4 inches and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told he couldn't do something. Tyler Jackson, an ex-Marine from Chicago with forearms like tree trunks and a chest covered in tattoos commemorating his tours in Afghanistan, cracked his knuckles and grinned whenever the instructor's attention turned to Maya. Marcus Sullivan, a quiet ranch hand from Montana whose lanky frame disguised surprising strength, kept his opinions to himself but couldn't hide the skepticism in his pale blue eyes when he looked at Maya. Even Daniel Kim, the son of Korean immigrants who had worked his way through MIT before deciding he wanted something more meaningful than a corporate career, seemed to question whether Maya belonged among them. The preliminary week had been brutal enough. Maya had barely met the minimum standards for the initial fitness test, her pull-ups executed with perfect form, but requiring every ounce of strength in her compact frame. While the men banged out 20 or 30 repetitions with apparent ease, Maya's 8 pull-ups had been earned through years of dedicated training and an absolute refusal to accept limitations. Her 2-mile run time had surprised everyone, including herself. While her shorter stride meant she had to work harder to keep pace, her endurance was exceptional. She had finished in the middle of the pack, her breathing steady while some of the larger candidates gasped for air at the finish line. But even this success was dismissed by the instructors as an anomaly, a fluke that wouldn't be repeated when the real testing began. The swimming portions had been Maya's strongest events. Her small frame moved through the water with surprising efficiency, and her technique was flawless. But even here, the instructors found fault. "Swimming like a fish won't help you when you're carrying a wounded teammate," Rodriguez had sneered, after Maya completed the 500-meter swim in impressive time. "Unless you plan on growing about 18 inches and adding 60 pounds of muscle in the next few weeks." Now, as the real training was about to begin, the atmosphere crackled with hostility and anticipation. The instructors had made their feelings clear through every snide comment, every dismissive glance, every accommodation they were forced to make for the program's first female candidate. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The other candidates, sensing the instructor's disapproval, began to distance themselves from Maya, afraid that association with her would mark them as weak by proxy. Commander Sarah Blake, the program's executive officer and highest ranking woman on the base, had fought hard for Maya's inclusion in the program. Blake herself had never been through SEAL training, her expertise lying in intelligence and special operations planning. But she understood the importance of breaking barriers and had used her considerable influence to ensure Maya received a fair shot. Now watching the hostility unfold, She wondered if she had done Maya a favor or set her up for public humiliation. The base itself buzzed with rumors and speculation. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit special operations community that a woman was attempting SEAL training. Old-timers who had served in the teams for decades shook their heads in disgust, muttering about political correctness and the decline of military standards. Younger service members were split between curiosity and skepticism, many placing bets on how long Maya would last once the real training began. Chief Rodriguez called the formation to attention, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. Class 247, you are about to begin the most challenging military training program in the world. Over the next 6 months, we will strip away everything you think you know about yourselves. We will push you beyond your physical limits, past your mental breaking points, and into territory you never imagined existed. He began pacing again, his boots clicking against the concrete with military precision. Most of you will quit. Statistics say that 80% of you will ring that bell before you complete this program. And that's when we have quality candidates, this class. He paused dramatically, his eyes finding Maya in the formation. This class presents unique challenges. The implication hung heavy in the air. Maya felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger, but she forced herself to remain motionless, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She had trained for this moment for 3 years, pushing her body to its absolute limits, studying every manual, watching every documentary, learning everything she could about what lay ahead. She had known the odds. She had known the prejudice she would face. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it firsthand were entirely different things. Instructor Williams stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over several candidates. Before we begin, let me make something crystal clear. The standards in this program do not change for anyone. We don't lower the bar, we don't provide special accommodations, and we don't pass candidates because they represent certain demographics. His eyes locked onto Maya with laser intensity. The teams don't care about your gender, your background, or your feelings. They care about whether you can perform when lives are on the line. Thompson moved to flank the formation from the other side, creating a triangle of intimidation with Rodriguez at the apex. In war, the enemy doesn't care if you're a diversity. Higher, they don't care if you represent a historic first. They will kill you without hesitation if you're not prepared. And more importantly, your weakness will get your teammates killed. The psychological warfare had begun before the physical training even started. Maya understood that this was part of the process, that the instructors were designed to break candidates mentally before their bodies failed them. But the personal nature of the attacks, the constant references to her gender and size, created an additional layer of pressure that none of her male counterparts would face. Dr. Hawkins made notes on her clipboard as she observed the interaction. In her professional opinion, Maya was already facing challenges that bordered on hazing. The subtle and not-so-subtle messages about her unworthiness, the constant references to her appearance and gender, the implication that she was somehow endangering her future teammates by her mere presence, all of these created a hostile environment that went beyond the normal stress of SEAL training. But Maya had expected this. Growing up in a military family, she had heard the stories about women in combat roles, the resistance they faced, the additional scrutiny they endured. Her father, Colonel James Chen, had spent 30 years in the Army Rangers, retiring as one of the most decorated officers in the special operations community. He had initially opposed her decision to attempt SEAL training, not because he doubted her abilities, but because he knew the price she would pay for breaking barriers. "Baby girl," he had told her during their last conversation before she shipped out to Coronado, "you're not just fighting to become a SEAL. You're fighting to prove that every woman who comes after you deserves the chance." That's a heavy burden for someone who weighs less than most people's backpacks. Her mother, Dr. Linda Chen, A trauma surgeon who had served multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, had been more supportive but equally realistic. "Maya, I've seen what war does to people. I've put the pieces back together when the training wasn't good enough, when someone wasn't strong enough, when the standards were compromised for the wrong reasons. If you do this, you have to be better than perfect. You have to be so undeniably excellent that even your harshest critics can't question your place there." Maya had carried those words with her through 3 years of preparation. She had trained with former SEALs who pushed her harder than any instructor legally could. She had subjected herself to hypothermia training in ice baths, sleep deprivation exercises that lasted for days, and psychological stress tests that would have broken most people. She had learned to function on 2 hours of sleep, to maintain focus while being screamed at by multiple people simultaneously, to push through pain that her mind insisted was unbearable. But nothing had prepared her for the concentrated hostility she now faced. The instructors weren't just testing her physical and mental capabilities. They were trying to convince her that she didn't belong, that her very presence was an insult to the legacy of the teams. Every snide comment, every dismissive gesture, every implication that she was somehow less than her male counterparts was designed to chip away at her confidence and determination. As the formation continued to stand at attention, other personnel began to gather around the training area. Word had spread quickly that Hell Week was beginning with a female candidate, and curiosity had drawn spectators from across the base. Some watched with genuine interest, wondering if Maya would prove the skeptics wrong. Others came hoping to witness her failure, to confirm their beliefs about women in combat roles. Master Chief Petty Officer Robert Harrison, a legend in the SEAL community with 40 years of service and more combat deployments than most people had birthdays, stood on the balcony of the command building observing the proceedings. Harrison had trained thousands of SEALs over his career and had seen every type of candidate imaginable. He had watched cocky college athletes break down in tears, seen quiet farm boys emerge as natural warriors, witnessed the transformation of ordinary men into extraordinary operators. But he had never trained a woman. The policy had changed only recently, and Maya was the first to meet the preliminary qualifications. Harrison found himself genuinely curious about how she would perform, though he kept his thoughts to himself. In his experience, the candidates who surprised you were often the ones who looked least likely to succeed. The morning sun climbed higher, and the temperature began to rise. Standing at attention in full gear was already taking its toll on some candidates, sweat beginning to show through their fatigues. Maya felt the familiar burn of static muscle tension, but her years of preparation had conditioned her for far worse. She had spent countless hours in stress positions, learning to divorce her mind from her body's complaints. Rodriguez finally called for the formation to move out, leading them toward the obstacle course that would serve as their introduction to Hell Week. The course itself was a monument to physical intimidation. Towering walls that required teamwork to overcome, rope climbs that tested upper body strength to its limits, and obstacles designed to simulate the challenges they might face in combat. As they approached the first obstacle, a 12-foot wall topped with barbed wire, the instructor's commentary began in earnest. "This wall represents the lowest barrier you'll face in the teams," Thompson announced, his voice carrying across the group. "If you can't get over this, you might as well pack your bags now." The candidates lined up to attempt the obstacle one by one. Morrison went first, his football background evident as he powered over the wall with minimal effort. Jackson followed, his Marine training serving him well as he scaled the barrier with textbook technique. One by one, the men conquered the obstacle, some struggling more than others, but all eventually making it over. Then it was Maya's turn. She approached the wall with steady determination, studying the handholds and planning her route. At 5'2", the wall represented a more significant challenge for her than for any of her taller classmates. where they could reach the top with a good jump and pull up. She would need to find intermediate holds and work her way up systematically. "Oh, this should be good," Williams muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Somebody get a ladder for the little lady." Maya ignored the comment and leaped for the first handhold, her fingers finding purchase on the rough wood. The wall was designed to be climbed without assistance, but her height disadvantage meant she had to work harder for every inch of progress. Her arms burned as she pulled herself up, searching for the next grip point. "Come on, princess," Rodriguez called out. "Your teammates are waiting." In combat, hesitation gets people killed. Maya's jaw clenched, but she continued climbing. Her technique was flawless, her movements efficient and controlled. Where the larger candidates had relied on brute strength, she used leverage and momentum to overcome her size disadvantage. Slowly but steadily, she worked her way to the top of the wall. The descent was where her training truly showed. While most candidates simply dropped or lowered themselves down, Maya executed a controlled climb down the far side, her small hands finding holds that others had missed. She hit the ground with cat-like grace and immediately assumed the ready position, waiting for the next command. The instructors said nothing, but their expression showed surprise. They had expected Maya to struggle with the wall, possibly to fail entirely on her first attempt. Her successful completion, executed with better technique than several of her male counterparts, didn't fit their narrative. "Lucky," Thompson muttered to Rodriguez. "The real tests haven't started yet." But as the morning progressed and the obstacles continued, Maya's luck seemed to hold. At the rope climb, her lighter weight proved advantageous, allowing her to ascend with less effort than the heavier candidates. Her rock climbing background, developed during years of weekend trips with her father, gave her an edge on technical obstacles that required problem-solving rather than raw strength. By the time they reached the log carry, however, Maya's physical limitations became unavoidable. The log's waterlogged telephone poles that weighed over 200 pounds were designed to be carried by teams of 6 or 8 candidates. For Maya, who weighed barely 115 pounds, even her share of the load represented a significant challenge. "This is where reality sets in," Rodriguez announced as the candidates gathered around the logs. "These logs represent the weight of mission-critical equipment, wounded teammates, or essential supplies. In the field, you don't get to choose how much you carry based on your size. You carry what the mission requires." The candidates organized themselves into teams, and Maya found herself grouped with Morrison, Jackson, Sullivan, Kim, and 2 other candidates. As they positioned themselves around the log, the disparity became immediately apparent. Where the men could grip the log at shoulder height, Maya had to reach above her head just to get her hands in position. "This is ridiculous," Jackson muttered as they prepared to lift. "She can't even reach the damn thing properly." "Maybe she can crawl underneath and act as a wheel," Morrison suggested, earning chuckles from several nearby candidates. Maya positioned herself as best she could, her hands burning as she gripped the rough wood. When Rodriguez gave the command to lift, she felt the full weight of the log settle onto her shoulders. The load was crushing, far exceeding anything she had trained with, but she gritted her teeth and began moving with the team. The log carry was a quarter-mile journey across sand, through shallow water, and up a steep embankment. Within the first 100 yards, Maya's legs began to shake under the load. Her breathing became labored, and she could feel her grip starting to slip. But she refused to voice any complaint, knowing that any sign of weakness would be seized upon by the instructors as proof of her inadequacy. "Come on, Pocket," Jackson grunted as they struggled through the soft sand. "Pull your weight." The irony of the comment wasn't lost on Maya. She was carrying proportionally more weight than any of her teammates, her small frame bearing a load that represented nearly double her body weight. But she knew that explanations would be seen as excuses, so she dug deeper and continued pushing forward. By the halfway point, Maya's vision began to blur from the strain. Sweat poured down her face, mixing with sand and salt water. Her shoulders felt like they were being crushed by a hydraulic press, and her legs trembled with each step. But around her, the other candidates were struggling too. Even Morrison, with his football conditioning, was breathing hard and starting to flag. "This is what separates the teams from everyone else," Thompson called out as he jogged alongside the struggling group. "When your body wants to quit, when your mind tells you it's impossible, you keep going, because lives depend on it." Maya's world narrowed to the simple act of placing one foot in front of the other. The log seemed to grow heavier with each step, the voices of the instructors fading into background noise. She reached deep into reserves she didn't know she possessed, drawing on years of training and a lifetime of being underestimated. When they finally reached the end point and were allowed to set the log down, Maya's legs gave out entirely. She collapsed to her knees in the sand, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. Around her, the other candidates were in similar states of exhaustion, but they had remained standing. "Pathetic," Rodriguez announced, his voice cutting through Maya's exhaustion. "In the field, collapsing after completing a mission is a luxury you can't afford. The enemy doesn't wait for you to catch your breath." Maya forced herself back to her feet, her legs still shaking but her resolve intact. She had completed the obstacle, had carried her share of the load despite the obvious disadvantages. But instead of recognition, she received only criticism and implications that her momentary weakness endangered her hypothetical teammates. As the morning continued, the pattern repeated itself. Maya would excel at obstacles that favored technique and endurance, surprising the instructors with her competence. But whenever raw strength or size became factors, her limitations were exposed and magnified by the constant commentary from the training staff. The cold water immersion test proved to be another revealing challenge. Candidates were required to enter the frigid Pacific Ocean and remain immersed up to their necks for 30 minutes while performing various exercises. The test was designed to evaluate mental toughness and the ability to function under extreme physical stress. Maya's smaller body mass meant she would lose heat more quickly than her larger counterparts, putting her at a significant physiological disadvantage. As she waded into the surf, the shocking cold immediately began to sap her strength and cloud her thinking. Within minutes, her teeth were chattering uncontrollably, and her muscles began to cramp. But her preparation had included extensive cold water training. She had spent hours in ice baths, learning to control her breathing and maintain focus despite her body's panicked responses to hypothermia. As the other candidates began to struggle with the cold, cursing and gasping, Maya settled into a meditative rhythm that allowed her to endure. "Look at that," Williams observed to his fellow instructors. "Princess is handling the cold better than half these big tough guys." It was the first neutral comment Maya had heard from any instructor all day, and she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. But the comment was quickly followed by Thompson's inevitable criticism. "Cold tolerance won't matter when she can't carry her gear or keep up with the team," he replied. "This is just one data point in a long evaluation." As the 30 minutes dragged on, several candidates began to show signs of severe hypothermia. Their movements became sluggish, their speech slurred, and their decision-making impaired. Maya, despite her size disadvantage, remained alert and functional, completing the required exercises with precision, while some of her larger teammates struggled to follow simple commands. When they were finally allowed to exit the water, Maya's lips were blue, and her entire body shook with violent tremors. But she had outlasted 3 candidates who had been pulled from the water by the safety personnel. As they wrapped themselves in scratchy military blankets and tried to restore circulation to their extremities, Maya noticed some of the other candidates looking at her with something approaching respect. "How the hell did you handle that better than Morrison?" Sullivan asked quietly, his teeth still chattering from his own ordeal in the water. Maya shrugged, not trusting herself to speak without her voice, betraying the toll the exercise had taken on her. She had learned early in her military career that actions spoke louder than words, and that any appearance of bragging or self-promotion would be used against her by those looking for reasons to exclude her. But privately, she allowed herself a moment of pride. The cold water test had been one of her biggest concerns coming into the program. Her research had shown that smaller candidates often struggled with hypothermia challenges, and she had dedicated months to cold water acclimatization. Training. The investment had paid off, giving her a rare victory in a day filled with reminders of her physical limitations. The afternoon brought new challenges and fresh opportunities for the instructors to highlight Maya's perceived inadequacies. The boat races, ASEAL, training staple that required teams to carry inflatable boats over their heads while running on the beach, presented another obstacle where size and strength were paramount. Maya found herself assigned to a boat crew with Kim, Sullivan, and 3 other candidates. The inflatable boat, when wet and loaded with gear, weighed over 400 pounds. Distributed among 6 people, each crew member's share of the load was manageable for most candidates. But Maya's height meant she had to reach higher than anyone else to grip the boat, putting additional strain on her shoulders and arms. "This is going to be a disaster," one of her boat crew members muttered as they prepared for the race. "We're going to lose because of dead weight." Maya said nothing, but the comment stung. She had trained extensively with weighted carries and had developed techniques to maximize her effectiveness, despite her size limitations. But she also understood that teamwork was crucial, and that her crew's attitude could doom them regardless of her individual performance. The race began with Rodriguez's whistle, and immediately Maya's crew fell behind. The other teams, composed entirely of larger candidates, moved with smooth efficiency across the sand. Maya's crew struggled to find a rhythm. Their different heights and the distraction of Maya's obvious size disadvantage creating coordination problems. "Come on, Pocket," Kim grunted as they fell further behind. "We're getting smoked because you can barely reach the boat." The criticism was fair but unhelpful. Maya was already straining to maintain her grip and keep pace with the longer strides of her teammates. Her shoulders burned with the effort of holding the boat above her head while jogging through the soft sand. But she also knew that falling behind in a team event would be seen as evidence that her individual limitations compromised unit effectiveness. Halfway through the race, Maya made a decision that would later prove controversial. Rather than continuing to struggle with the overhead carry, she shifted her position to support the boat from underneath, using her legs and core strength to help bear the load. The technique was unconventional but effective, allowing her crew to pick up speed and close the gap with the leaders. "What the hell are you doing?" Thompson shouted as he observed Maya's modified technique. "The boat goes over your head, not on your shoulders." But Maya's innovation had worked. Her crew finished second in the race, a respectable showing that exceeded everyone's expectations. However, instead of recognition for problem-solving and adaptability, Maya faced criticism for not following standard procedures. "In the teams, we do things the right way, not the easy way," Rodriguez announced as the crews gathered for debrief. "Improvisation can get people killed when muscle memory and standard procedures are what keep you alive." The message was clear. Maya's attempt to compensate for her physical limitations through technique and innovation was seen as a dangerous deviation from established norms. The fact that her approach had been successful was irrelevant. What mattered was conformity to standards that had been developed for and by much larger operators. As the day wore on, Maya began to feel the cumulative effect of the physical and psychological pressure. Every muscle in her body ached from the morning's exertions. Her hands were blistered from rope climbs and log carries. Her shoulders throbbed from the boat race. But more challenging than the physical pain was the constant stream of criticism and doubt from the instructors and some of her fellow candidates. The evening brought a brief respite in the form of chow time, but even this basic necessity became another opportunity for humiliation. The mess hall portions, designed to fuel the massive caloric needs of large men undergoing extreme physical training, were comically oversized for Maya's small frame. As she sat with her tray of food, struggling to consume even half of the enormous serving, the comments began again. "Look at that," Jackson observed loudly. "Princess can't even finish her vegetables. How's she going to carry a full combat load? If she can't handle a meal?" Maya forced herself to continue eating despite her lack of appetite. She understood the importance of nutrition in sustained performance, and she couldn't afford to lose any more weight during the grueling training ahead. But the public scrutiny of even basic biological functions added another layer of stress to an already overwhelming situation. Kim, who had been relatively neutral toward Maya throughout the day, leaned across the table with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Look, I'm not trying to be a dick, but you've got to know that this isn't sustainable. You're already struggling with the basic requirements, and we haven't even started the real hell week yet." His tone was more sympathetic than hostile, but the message was the same one Maya had been hearing all day. She didn't belong. She couldn't keep up, and her presence was a liability to her teammates. The fact that the criticism was coming from someone who seemed to genuinely care about her welfare made it somehow more devastating than the overt hostility from the instructors. "I appreciate the concern," Maya replied quietly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. "But I didn't come this far to quit on the first day." Kim nodded but didn't look convinced. Around the table, the other candidates continued their own conversations, but Maya could feel their sideways glances and sense their skepticism. She had become a curiosity, a distraction, a problem to be solved rather than a teammate to be supported. As the evening progressed and the candidates were dismissed to their barracks for a few hours of rest before the next phase of training, Maya found herself isolated in a way that went beyond physical separation. The other candidates had begun to form the bonds that would either carry them through the program or break under the pressure of shared suffering. But Maya remained an outsider, marked by her gender and size as fundamentally different from her peers. Lying in her narrow bunk, surrounded by the sounds of exhausted men trying to grab whatever sleep they could before the next day's trials, Maya stared at the ceiling and took inventory of her situation. Physically, she was holding up better than she had feared. Her preparation had been thorough, and while she was clearly at a disadvantage in terms of raw strength and size, her technique and conditioning were allowing her to compete mentally. However, the challenge was greater than she had anticipated. The constant scrutiny, the relentless criticism, the implication that her very presence was compromising the program's integrity, all of this created a psychological burden that went far beyond the normal stress of military training. She was fighting not just to meet the program's standards, but to prove that women deserved the opportunity to try. Outside, she could hear the instructors conducting their own debrief of the day's events. Their voices carried through the thin walls of the barracks, and Maya couldn't help but listen as they discussed her performance. "She's tougher than I expected," Williams admitted grudgingly. "That cold water evolution showed some real mental strength." "Mental strength doesn't carry a wounded teammate," Thompson replied. "She's a liability waiting to happen. One mistake, one moment where her size becomes a factor, and people die." "Maybe," Rodriguez interjected, "but she's earned the right to fail on her own. We can't just run her out based on assumptions." The conversation continued, but Maya had heard enough. Even among the instructors, there was disagreement about her potential and her place in the program. Some seemed genuinely curious to see how far she could go, while others appeared determined to prove her inadequacy. The one thing they all agreed on was that she was an unknown variable in a system that prized predictability above all else. As Maya finally drifted off to sleep, Her last conscious thought was of her father's words. "You're not just fighting to become a SEAL. You're fighting to prove that every woman who comes after you deserves the chance." The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than any log she had carried that day. But it also provided a source of strength that the instructors couldn't understand or take away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, fresh opportunities for her. Failure and continued scrutiny from those who believed she didn't belong. But Maya had survived the first day, had proven that she could compete despite the obvious disadvantages. More importantly, she had begun to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of those who had written her off before she even began. The real test was just beginning, but Maya Chen was still standing, still fighting, and still refusing to accept the limitations that others tried to impose on her. In a program designed to break the strongest men, she had found ways to bend without breaking, to adapt without compromising, to persist in the face of overwhelming opposition. The instructors might have the power to fail her, the other candidates might doubt her abilities, and the entire military establishment might question her presence. But Maya had something that couldn't be taught or trained, an absolute refusal to accept that her dreams were impossible simply because she was different from those who had come before her. As sleep finally claimed her exhausted body, Maya dreamed not of the challenges that lay ahead, but of the moment when she would prove that sometimes the smallest person in the room could cast the longest shadow. The pre-dawn darkness enveloped Naval Special Warfare Command like a suffocating blanket as the shrill blast of air horns shattered the fragile sleep of Class 247. Maya's eyes snapped open instantly, her body already moving before her mind fully processed the chaos erupting around her. The instructors had descended upon the barracks like a plague of locusts, their voices a cacophony of screamed commands and deliberate confusion designed to disorient and overwhelm. "Move, move. You have 30 seconds to get your sorry butts outside in full gear." Chief Rodriguez's voice cut through the darkness like a serrated blade. "Last one out does push-ups until I get tired of counting." Maya rolled from her bunk with practiced efficiency, her small hands already reaching for the gear she had methodically arranged the night before. Around her, larger candidates stumbled and cursed as they fought to dress in the darkness, their size becoming a disadvantage in the cramped quarters. While they struggled with equipment that seemed to tangle around their bulk, Maya moved with fluid precision, each motion economical and purposeful. The chaos was intentional and brutal. Flashlights strobed through the barracks, creating disorienting patterns of light and shadow. Instructors moved between the bunks like predators, their commentary a constant stream of psychological warfare, designed to break concentration and confidence. "What's wrong, Jackson? Did somebody forget to pack your binky?" Thompson's voice dripped with sarcasm as the former Marine fumbled with his boots. "Maybe Mommy should have come to help you get dressed." Maya finished dressing and moved toward the door, her gear properly secured and her bearing composed despite the artificial urgency. But her swift preparation only served to draw unwanted attention from Instructor Williams, who blocked her path with his massive frame. Well, look who thinks she's ready," Williams sneered, his breath visible in the cold air. "Just because you can get dressed in the dark doesn't mean you belong here, princess." A trained monkey could probably manage that much. Maya maintained eye contact but said nothing, her silence more powerful than any response could have been. She had learned that engaging with the instructors, provocations only provided them with more ammunition for psychological attacks. Behind Williams, she could see other candidates still struggling with their equipment, their larger frames working against them in the confined space. "I asked you a question, candidate," Williams pressed, stepping closer until Maya had to crane her neck to maintain eye contact. "Do you think getting dressed quickly makes you special?" "No, Chief," Maya replied, her voice steady and clear. "I think following orders promptly is the minimum standard expected of any candidate." The response caught Williams off guard. He had expected defensiveness, excuses, or the stammering uncertainty that psychological pressure typically produced. Instead, Maya had deflected his attack while simultaneously implying that her quicker preparation was simply meeting standards rather than exceeding them. "Smart mouth," Williams muttered, but there was a grudging note of respect in his voice. He stepped aside, allowing Maya to exit the barracks, but his eyes followed her with increased interest. Outside, the California morning was bitter cold, the ocean breeze cutting through their gear like icy knives. The candidates formed up in the darkness, their breath creating clouds of vapor that dissipated quickly in the wind. Maya took her position in formation, noting that she had indeed been among the first to emerge from the barracks despite Williams' interference. Rodriguez materialized from the shadows like a wraith, his weathered face barely visible in the pre-dawn. "Bloom, congratulations, ladies. You managed to get dressed without adult supervision. Unfortunately, that's probably the last thing you'll do right for the next 6 months." He began pacing in front of the formation, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Today marks the beginning of what we call the evolution phase. For the next 2 weeks, you'll be tested on every skill, every physical capability, and every mental trait that defines a Navy SEAL. Most of you will discover that watching movies and reading books didn't actually prepare you for reality." Thompson appeared from the other direction, flanking the formation like a pack hunter. "The first evolution is a little something we like to call the pool competency test. For those of you who can't figure out what that means, we're going to see if you can survive underwater when things go wrong." Maya felt a flutter of anticipation, mixed with anxiety. The pool competency test was legendary among SEAL candidates, a series of underwater challenges designed to test not just swimming ability but mental toughness and the ability to function under extreme stress. Candidates would be required to swim lengths underwater while instructors attempted to remove their masks, steal their air supplies, and generally create life-threatening situations that had to be overcome through skill and determination rather than panic. The formation marched toward the pool complex, their boots echoing in synchronized rhythm across the empty base. As they walked, Maya could hear whispered conversations among the other candidates, speculation about what they would face and nervous jokes that barely concealed genuine fear. "I heard that last class, they had to pull 3 guys out unconscious." Morrison whispered to Jackson, his confidence from the previous day notably diminished. "They tie your gear in knots underwater, and you have to untangle it without coming up for air." "That's nothing," Sullivan replied, his Montana drawl carrying an edge of uncertainty. "My cousin went through the program 5 years ago," he said. "They make you swim the length of the pool with your hands tied behind your back." Maya listened to the speculation without comment, but she felt a familiar knot of determination forming in her stomach. The pool evolution would be different from the land-based challenges where her size had been a consistent disadvantage. In the water, technique and mental composure mattered more than raw strength. She had spent countless hours preparing for exactly this type of test, learning to remain calm when her air supply was compromised, and developing the swimming efficiency that her smaller frame could provide. The pool facility was a monument to functional intimidation. The main pool stretched 50 meters in length and varied from 8 to 12 feet in depth. Underwater obstacles created additional challenges, and the water temperature was maintained at a level designed to add hypothermic stress to every exercise. Diving platforms of varying heights lined one side, while a series of complex underwater mazes and training apparatus filled the deep end. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the base's chief medical officer and a specialist in underwater medicine, stood beside the pool with her emergency response team. Her presence was both reassuring and ominous, a reminder that the challenges ahead carried real risks that required professional medical supervision. "Before we begin," Dr. Martinez announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the consequences of underwater training gone wrong, "I want to make something absolutely clear. These evolutions are designed to push you to your limits, but they are not death wishes. If you experience genuine distress, if you feel yourself losing consciousness, or if you believe you are in immediate danger, surface immediately. Pride is not worth permanent injury or death. Her words hung in the air like a challenge and a warning. Maya understood that the medical officer was required to provide these safety briefings, but she also knew that surfacing prematurely would be seen as failure by the instructors and would likely result in elimination from the program. Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice cutting through the morning air. The pool competency test consists of 5 evolutions, each designed to evaluate a different aspect of your underwater capabilities. You will be scored on technique, composure, and completion time. Failure to complete any evolution results in immediate dismissal from the program. He gestured toward the pool, where several instructors were already in the water wearing full diving gear. Evolution 1 is the 50-meter underwater swim. You will swim the length of the pool submerged, surface, and immediately return underwater for the return lap. Total distance, 100 meters. Total time limit, 4 minutes. Thompson picked up the briefing, his voice carrying an edge of anticipation. Evolution 2 is equipment recovery. You'll enter the water wearing full gear, including boots, fatigues, and a weighted vest. Your equipment will be systematically removed by instructors, and you must recover each piece from the bottom of the pool while remaining underwater. Williams stepped forward for the third evolution, mask and regulator recovery. You'll be swimming underwater when an instructor will remove your mask and disconnect your air supply. You must locate both pieces of equipment in zero visibility conditions, reassemble them properly, and continue swimming. Rodriguez resumed the briefing for the 4th challenge, underwater knot tying. You'll dive to the bottom of the pool, where you'll find a series of ropes tied in complex knots. You must untie and retie specific knots according to the pattern shown on the deck. All work must be completed in a single breath. Thompson concluded with the final evolution, harassment and stress test. You'll enter the water for a normal swimming exercise. Instructors will create various emergency scenarios, including equipment failure, simulated drowning scenarios, and physical interference. You must complete the assigned swimming distance while overcoming each challenge without panicking or surfacing prematurely. The challenges were designed to test far more than swimming ability. They evaluated psychological resilience, problem solving under pressure, and the kind of mental toughness that allowed operators to function in life-threatening situations. Maya understood that her performance here would either validate her place in the program or provide additional ammunition for those who believed she didn't belong. The candidates drew lots to determine the order of testing, and Maya found herself assigned to the middle of the rotation. She would have time to observe the early performers and learn from their techniques, but she would also have time for anxiety to build as she watched others succeed or fail. Morrison drew the first position and approached the pool with the swagger that had served him well in college athletics. His dive was clean and powerful, his technique solid as he disappeared beneath the surface. The instructors tracked his progress. From the deck, their stopwatches marking time as he covered the first length underwater. Maya watched with analytical precision, noting Morrison's stroke technique and breathing pattern. He surfaced at the far end of the pool with time to spare, took a quick breath, and immediately submerged for the return lap. His college swimming background was evident in his efficiency, and he completed the evolution well within the time limit. Acceptable, Rodriguez announced as Morrison hauled himself from the pool, his chest heaving but his expression triumphant. Next candidate. Jackson followed with similar success, his marine training evident in his methodical approach to the challenge. Kim struggled more with the distance, but managed to complete both lengths within the time limit. One by one, the candidates ahead of Maya in the rotation completed the first evolution, some with ease and others barely making the time standard. Then came Daniel Foster, a quiet candidate from Nebraska whose slight build and unassuming demeanor had kept him largely below the instructor's radar. Foster entered the water confidently, but halfway through his first length, his stroke began to deteriorate. Maya could see him struggling to maintain depth, his kicks becoming erratic as oxygen debt began to affect his coordination. Foster surfaced, 20 meters short of the wall, gasping for air and clearly in distress. The instructor's reaction was immediate and merciless. "Evolution failed," Thompson announced. "Foster, collect your gear and report to administration for out-processing. Class 247, say goodbye to your teammate." The elimination was swift and final. Foster pulled himself from the pool with the dejected posture of someone whose dreams had just died in chlorinated water. Maya watched him gather his equipment and walk away, knowing that she was now one step closer to her own test and one candidate closer to the statistical probability of her own failure. "Chen, you're up," Rodriguez called out, his voice carrying an edge of anticipation that suggested he expected this to be where Maya's limitations finally became insurmountable. Maya approached the pool edge with measured steps, her breathing controlled and her focus narrowed to the challenge ahead. She had swum this distance countless times in training, had practiced breath holding until she could remain underwater for nearly 3 minutes, and had developed stroke techniques specifically designed to maximize efficiency for her smaller frame. But as she stood at the pool edge, she could feel the weight of every stare, the expectation of failure that seemed to press against her like a physical force. The other candidates watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism, while the instructors observed with the predatory attention of hunters waiting for their prey to stumble. "Take your time, Princess," Williams called out mockingly. "The water isn't going anywhere." Maya ignored the taunt and focused on her preparation. She took several deep breaths, hyperventilating slightly to saturate her blood with oxygen. Her pre-dive routine was precise and practiced, each breath calculated to maximize her underwater endurance. When she felt ready, Maya entered the water, with a clean dive that barely disturbed the surface. Immediately, she settled into the stroke pattern she had perfected over months of training. Her technique was flawless, each movement designed to conserve energy and maintain forward momentum while using minimal oxygen. Unlike the larger candidates who relied on power and strength, Maya's approach was all about efficiency. Her smaller frame moved through the water with minimal resistance, and her stroke technique had been refined to eliminate any wasted motion. She stayed deep, using the pressure to compress her lungs and extend her breath-holding capability. The first length passed smoothly, her body moving through the water like a torpedo. Maya could feel the familiar burn of oxygen debt beginning to build, but her training had conditioned her to function well beyond the point where most people would surface in panic. She touched the far wall and immediately pushed off for the return lap, her movements still controlled and purposeful. On the return length, Maya's smaller size began to work in her favor. While the larger candidates had to fight against their natural buoyancy and the resistance created by their bulk, Maya could maintain depth more easily and cut through the water with less effort. Her stroke remained steady even as her lungs began to burn with the need for oxygen. 20 meters from the finish, Maya felt the edge of panic begin to creep into her consciousness. Her vision started to narrow, and her stroke technique began to suffer as her body's systems became increasingly desperate for air. But instead of surfacing, she drew on the mental conditioning that had been central to her preparation. Maya had learned to function in states of oxygen deprivation, to push through the psychological barriers that convinced most people to surface prematurely. She had practiced swimming while instructors held her underwater, had trained herself to remain calm when her body screamed that survival required immediate action. With 10 meters remaining, Maya's stroke became a matter of pure will over physical limitation. Her technique was no longer textbook perfect, but her determination remained absolute. She touched the wall with barely a second to spare, surfaced, gasping for air, and immediately looked to the instructors for their assessment. The pool deck was silent for a moment, the instructors consulting their stopwatches and exchanging glances. Maya had completed the evolution within the time limit, but just barely. More importantly, her technique and composure had been superior to several candidates who had finished with more time to spare. Time, 3 minutes 58 seconds, Rodriguez announced, his voice neutral but carrying an undertone of surprise. Evolution complete. Maya pulled herself from the pool, her legs slightly unsteady but her expression composed. She had passed the first test, but she could see in the instructors' faces that her success was viewed as an anomaly rather than an indication of competence. The real challenges were still ahead. The second evolution proved more complex, testing not just swimming ability but problem-solving under pressure. Maya entered the water wearing full gear, the added weight and bulk immediately changing her buoyancy and movement patterns. The weighted vest alone added 30 pounds to her frame, a significant burden for someone who weighed barely over 100 pounds without equipment. As she began swimming underwater, the instructors moved into action with predatory efficiency. Hands reached for her gear, systematically removing her boots, then her vest, then pieces of her uniform. Each item was dropped to the bottom of the pool at different locations, creating a complex retrieval problem that had to be solved while holding her breath. Maya's preparation had included extensive training with equipment recovery, but the reality was far more challenging than any simulation. The instructors didn't simply remove her gear. They actively interfered with her attempts to recover it, creating additional obstacles and complications that tested her problem-solving abilities under extreme stress. Her smaller size became an unexpected advantage in the confined underwater environment. While larger candidates struggled to maneuver around the pool obstacles and equipment, Maya could slip through spaces and change direction with agility that her bulk counterparts couldn't match. She recovered her boots first, securing them to her belt before moving on to the more challenging task of retrieving her weighted vest. The vest had settled in the deepest part of the pool, and retrieving it required a dive that pushed Maya's breath-holding abilities to their absolute limit. As she descended, she could feel the pressure building in her ears and the familiar burn of oxygen debt intensifying. But her diving experience, developed through years of recreational training, allowed her to equalize pressure efficiently and maintain composure at depth. Securing the heavy vest while underwater proved to be a complex challenge that required both strength and technique. Maya had to position herself carefully, using leverage rather than raw power to lift the weight from the pool bottom. Her movements were deliberate and controlled, each action calculated to conserve energy and oxygen. As she ascended with the vest, Maya could feel her vision beginning to narrow and her coordination starting to suffer. The surface seemed impossibly far away, and her lungs burned with the desperate need for air. But she had trained for exactly this scenario, learning to function at the edge of consciousness while maintaining the mental clarity necessary for complex tasks. Maya surfaced with the vest secured and all her equipment recovered, her performance time well within the acceptable range. But more importantly, her technique and composure had been superior to several candidates who possessed significant advantages in size and strength. "Adequate," Thompson announced, but Maya could see surprise in his expression. He had clearly expected her to struggle with the equipment recovery, and her efficient completion of the evolution didn't fit his narrative about her capabilities. The third evolution, mask and regulator recovery, presented challenges that went beyond physical capability. Maya entered the water breathing from a scuba regulator, her mask providing clear vision as she began swimming underwater. Without warning, an instructor appeared beside her and yanked both the mask and regulator away, leaving her blind and without air in the middle of the pool. The shock was immediate and overwhelming. Maya's training had prepared her for this scenario, but the reality of sudden blindness and air loss underwater triggered primal panic responses that had to be overcome through mental discipline rather than physical technique. Her first instinct was to surface immediately, to escape the suffocating darkness and restore her air supply through the most direct means possible. But Maya forced herself to remain calm, drawing on meditation techniques and psychological conditioning that allowed her to function despite her body's panic demands for immediate action. She had practiced this exact scenario hundreds of times, learning to locate equipment by feel and to reassemble complex gear while managing her breathing and fighting off claustrophobia. Working entirely by touch, Maya began searching for her missing equipment. The mask was relatively easy to locate, but the regulator had been deliberately moved to make recovery more challenging. Her smaller hands proved advantageous in the detailed work of equipment manipulation, allowing her to feel for connections and components that larger fingers might struggle to manage efficiently. The psychological pressure was intense. Maya could feel her oxygen reserves depleting as she worked, and the darkness created a disorienting environment where panic could easily overwhelm rational thought. But her training had conditioned her to function in exactly these conditions, to maintain problem-solving capability even when her survival instincts demanded immediate flight. Maya successfully located and reassembled her equipment, cleared her mask underwater, and restored her air supply, all while remaining submerged. Her completion time was among the fastest in the class, and her technique demonstrated a level of comfort with complex underwater operations that impressed even the 5A skeptical instructors. Well executed, Rodriguez admitted grudgingly as Maya surfaced. The praise was minimal, but coming from the lead instructor, it represented a significant acknowledgement of competence. The fourth evolution, underwater knot tying, tested fine motor skills and problem-solving under pressure. Maya descended to the bottom of the pool where a complex array of ropes awaited, their knots deliberately tied in patterns that would challenge even experienced candidates. The task required not just the ability to tie specific knots, but the knowledge to recognize different knot types and the dexterity to manipulate rope while holding her breath. Maya's preparation had included extensive practice with rope work, but the underwater environment added layers of complexity that transformed simple tasks into significant challenges. The water resistance made every movement more difficult, and the pressure at depth affected her fine motor control. Additionally, the time pressure of breath holding meant that efficiency was crucial. Her smaller hands proved to be a significant advantage in the detailed work of knot manipulation. While larger candidates struggled with the precise finger movements required for complex rope work, Maya's dexterity allowed her to work efficiently even underwater. Her technique was clean and precise, each knot tied with the kind of attention to detail that suggested extensive practice and natural aptitude. Maya completed the knot-tying evolution faster than any previous candidate, her work executed with a precision that eliminated any question about her technical competence. As she surfaced, she could see genuine surprise in the expressions of both instructors and fellow candidates. Her performance had exceeded expectations by such a significant margin that it forced our evaluation of assumptions about her capabilities. Outstanding technique, Williams admitted, his voice carrying a note of respect that had been absent throughout the previous day's training. That's the kind of rope work we expect from experienced operators. The final evolution, the harassment and stress test, represented the culmination of everything that had come before. Maya entered the water for what appeared to be a straightforward swimming exercise, but immediately the instructors began creating artificial emergencies and complications, designed to test her ability to maintain composure under extreme pressure. The harassment began subtly, with instructors swimming alongside and creating minor distractions. But it quickly escalated to direct physical interference, simulated equipment failures, and scenario-based challenges that required split-second decision-making while managing oxygen limitations and physical demands. Maya found herself dealing with instructors who grabbed her equipment, created artificial entanglements, and simulated emergency scenarios that would have been life-threatening in real-world conditions. Each challenge required not just physical response but mental adaptation, the ability to maintain problem-solving capability while under extreme stress. Her smaller size became both an advantage and a disadvantage during the harassment phase. While she could escape some forms of interference more easily than larger candidates, she was also more vulnerable to physical manipulation by the instructors. Maya had to rely on technique and mental composure rather than strength to overcome the obstacles placed in her path. Throughout the harassment evolution, Maya maintained the kind of calm focus that characterized truly exceptional performers. While other candidates became flustered and reactive under pressure, she remained analytical and methodical, treating each challenge as a problem to be solved rather than a crisis to be survived. Her completion of the final evolution was flawless, executed with a level of composure and technical proficiency that left no room for criticism. Maya had not just survived the pool competency test. She had excelled in ways that forced even her harshest critics to acknowledge her capabilities. As the candidates gathered for the post-evolution debrief, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Maya's performance had been so consistently excellent that it became impossible to dismiss her success as luck or anomaly. She had demonstrated technical skills, mental toughness, and problem-solving abilities that met or exceeded the standards set by her larger male counterparts. Chen, Rodriguez called out as the group prepared to move to the next training phase. Outstanding performance across all evolutions. That's the kind of underwater competency we expect from SEAL operators. The praise was significant not just for its rarity, but for its public nature. Rodriguez had acknowledged Maya's excellence in front of the entire class, making it clear that her performance could not be dismissed or minimized. For the first time since arriving at the training facility, Maya felt like she had earned a measure of respect rather than simply endured toleration. But even as she savored the moment of recognition, Maya understood that this was just one test among many. The instructors who had been forced to acknowledge her competence in the water would be looking for opportunities to prove that her success was limited to specific circumstances. The other candidates who had witnessed her excellence would be reassessing their assumptions, but they would also be watching for signs of weakness in future challenges. The pool competency test had been a victory, but it was a victory that came with increased expectations and intensified scrutiny. Maya had proven that she belonged in the water, but the land-based challenges ahead would test different capabilities and present new opportunities for her critics to question her place in the program. As Class 247 moved toward their next evolution, Maya could feel the dynamics beginning to shift around her. Some candidates who had been dismissive now looked at her with grudging respect. Others seemed more determined than ever to find evidence that her pool performance was an exception rather than the rule. The instructors, too, were adapting their approach. Maya's success had forced them to acknowledge that their initial assumptions about her capabilities might have been premature. But rather than accepting her competence, many seemed determined to find challenges where her limitations would be exposed. Thompson fell into step beside Maya as they marched toward the next training area, his expression thoughtful rather than hostile. "That was impressive work in the pool, Chen," he said quietly, "but don't let it go to your head. The water was your element. Land-based operations are where the real SEAL work happens, and that's where size and strength matter most." His comment was both acknowledgement and warning, recognition of her success, coupled with a reminder that greater challenges lay ahead. Maya nodded her understanding, appreciating the honesty even as she prepared mentally for the increased difficulty that would inevitably follow. The morning sun climbed higher as Class 247 prepared for their next series of evolutions, and Maya found herself in a position she had never expected to occupy. Instead of fighting simply to survive the training, she was now being viewed as a legitimate competitor, someone whose performance would be measured against the standards of excellence rather than the minimum requirements for continuation. The pool competency test had been a turning point, but Maya understood that it was just the beginning of a much longer journey. Each success would raise the bar higher. Each demonstration of competence would increase the expectations for future performance. She had proven that she could excel in specific circumstances, but the real test would be her ability to maintain that level of excellence across the full spectrum of SEAL training. As they approached the next challenge, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had faced her first major test and emerged not just successful but triumphant. The voices that had questioned her belonging were quieter now, replaced by a grudging recognition that she might actually possess the capabilities necessary to succeed. But Maya also understood that respect in the military was earned through consistent performance over time, not single demonstrations of excellence. The pool competency test had opened a door, but walking through it would require sustained effort and continued proof that her success was based on genuine capability rather than temporary advantage. The challenge ahead would test new skills and present fresh opportunities for both success and failure. Maya felt ready for whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that she could compete at the highest levels and the determination to prove that her place in the program was earned rather than granted. The obstacle course stretched before Class 247 like a mechanical nightmare. 37 stations of engineered torment designed to break both body and spirit. Dawn's first light cast long shadows across the timber walls, rope climbs, and cargo nets that had claimed countless dreams over the decades. Maya stood with her remaining classmates, their number already reduced to 19 after the pool evolutions, studying the course that would determine who possessed the physical and mental fortitude to continue. Instructor Chief Rodriguez gathered the candidates around the timing station, his weathered face impassive as he outlined the challenge ahead. The obstacle course record for this facility is 14 minutes and 37 seconds, set by a candidate who went on to become one of the most decorated operators in SEAL history. The minimum passing time is 18 minutes. Anything over that, and you're done. Maya felt the familiar flutter of anxiety mixed with determination. The obstacle course represented everything that should work against her smaller frame. Every challenge that her critics expected would expose her limitations. Wall climbs that favored height, rope traverses that demanded upper body strength, cargo net scrambles that rewarded reach and power over technique and agility. Thompson stepped forward, his eyes scanning the group with predatory intensity. The obstacles are designed to simulate real-world operational challenges. Every wall represents a compound you might need to breach. Every rope climb represents extraction under fire. Every traverse represents terrain you'll cross while carrying wounded teammates. The first candidate, Morrison, approached the starting line with the confidence that had carried him through college athletics. His size and strength were immediately apparent as he attacked the course with raw power, muscling over walls and through obstacles with brute force efficiency. His technique was solid but unrefined, relying on physical advantages rather than tactical approach. Maya watched with analytical precision, noting how Morrison's bulk worked both for and against him on different obstacles. His height allowed him to reach handholds that would challenge shorter candidates, but his weight made certain traverses more difficult than they needed to be. He completed the course in 16 minutes and 42 seconds, a respectable time that established the baseline for comparison. Jackson followed with similar results, his Marine background evident in his systematic approach to each challenge. Kim struggled more with the upper body intensive obstacles, but compensated with determination and solid technique. One by one, the candidates ahead of Maya in the rotation completed their runs, some with ease and others barely making the time standard. Then came Marcus Webb, a former college wrestler whose compact build and explosive strength had made him a standout performer in previous evolutions. Webb attacked the course with ferocious intensity, his technique polished and his execution flawless. He moved through the obstacles like they were designed specifically for his capabilities, flow and power combining in perfect harmony. When Webb crossed the finish line, the timing board flashed a number that sent shockwaves through the assembled group. 14 minutes and 19 seconds. A new course record, 18 seconds faster than the previous mark that had stood for over a decade. Outstanding performance, Webb, Rodriguez announced, genuine admiration evident in his voice. That's the kind of excellence we expect from SEAL operators. The new record reset everyone's expectations and added pressure to the remaining candidates. Maya found herself 7th in the rotation, positioned perfectly to observe different approaches while building her own strategy for attacking the course. Thompson called her name with particular emphasis, his voice carrying undertones of anticipation that suggested he expected this to be where her limitations finally became insurmountable. The gathered instructors positioned themselves at key obstacles, their clipboards ready to document what they assumed would be her inevitable struggle. Maya approached the starting line with controlled breathing and focused intensity. She had studied every obstacle, analyzed the techniques of previous candidates, and developed specific strategies for overcoming the challenges where her size would be most disadvantageous. Her approach would rely on efficiency over power, technique over strength, and mental composure over emotional reaction. The timer started, and Maya exploded into motion with surprising speed. Her first obstacle was a 12-foot wall that had challenged several previous candidates. Where others had relied on jumping ability and upper body strength, Maya used a running approach that generated momentum, allowing her to reach higher handholds than her height should have permitted. Her wall technique was flawless, each movement calculated to conserve energy while maintaining speed. Instead of powering over obstacles, she flowed around and through them, finding efficient paths that her larger competitors had missed. Her rock climbing background showed immediately, her small hands finding holds that others couldn't use, and her lightweight frame allowing moves that would be impossible for heavier candidates. The rope climb that had slowed several previous candidates became Maya's first opportunity to showcase her technical superiority. While others relied on arm strength and struggled with the ascent, Maya used a leg-wrapping technique that distributed the load efficiently and allowed her to climb with smooth, controlled movements. She ascended faster than any previous candidate, her technique so polished that it looked effortless. Spectators began to gather as word spread that something unusual was happening on the obstacle course. Maya's technique was drawing attention not just for its effectiveness, but for its elegance. She moved through challenges with fluid precision that made the obstacles look easier than they actually were. The cargo net traverse, a 100-foot span that tested grip strength and mental toughness, became another showcase for Maya's technical approach. Her smaller hands gripped the rope more securely than larger fingers could manage, and her lightweight frame put less stress on her grip strength. She crossed the traverse faster than Webb's record-setting pace, her movements controlled and efficient. Halfway through the course, Maya's time was tracking significantly ahead of the previous record. The instructors exchanged glances of disbelief, their clipboards forgotten as they watched her dismantling obstacles that were supposed to expose her limitations. Her technique was so superior that it was forcing a reevaluation of how the challenges should be approached. The log carry, a 200-pound timber that had to be transported 50 yards, represented the most significant strength challenge on the course. Maya approached it with tactical intelligence rather than brute force, using leverage and body positioning to move the log efficiently despite the obvious weight disadvantage. Her technique was textbook perfect, demonstrating understanding of physics and body mechanics that maximized her limited strength. Thompson jogged alongside Maya's section of the course, his expression shifting from skeptical anticipation to genuine amazement. Her performance was beyond exceptional. It was revolutionary. She wasn't just completing obstacles despite her size limitations. She was completing them better than candidates with significant physical advantages. The balance beam section, notorious for eliminating candidates who rushed through it, became another demonstration of Maya's technical superiority. Her smaller frame provided better balance control, and her precision allowed her to move across the narrow beam faster than candidates, who had to be more cautious about weight distribution. She practically danced across obstacles that had challenged much larger candidates. Williams positioned himself at the rope swing, expecting Maya to struggle with the upper body demands of the pendulum traverse. Instead, he watched her execute the most technically perfect rope swing in the course's recorded history. Her timing was flawless, her body position optimal, and her landing controlled and precise. As Maya approached the final third of the course, her time was tracking well, ahead of Webb's record pace. The gathered crowd had grown to include off-duty personnel and training staff, who had heard about the exceptional performance and progress. Cameras appeared as people began documenting what was clearly a historic run. The tire flip section required candidates to move a 400-pound tractor tire through a slalom course, testing both strength and coordination. Maya's approach was tactical rather than brutal, using proper lifting technique and momentum to move the tire efficiently. While she couldn't muscle it like the stronger candidates, her technique was so superior that she maintained pace despite the obvious disadvantage. Rodriguez moved to the final obstacle complex, his stopwatch displaying a time that seemed impossible. Maya was on pace to shatter Webb's record by a significant margin, her technique and efficiency compensating for any strength limitations, and then some. Her performance was forcing a complete reevaluation of how the obstacles should be approached. The final wall climb, a 15-foot vertical surface with minimal handholds, had been designed to be the course's ultimate challenge. Maya approached it with the confidence that had built throughout her run, her technique refined through years of rock climbing experience. She found handholds that others had missed, used body positioning that maximized efficiency, and climbed with fluid grace that made the ascent look simple. As Maya dropped down from the final obstacle and sprinted toward the finish line, the timing board prepared to display a number that would rewrite the facility's record books. Her technique had been so superior, her efficiency so refined, that she had overcome significant physical disadvantages through pure excellence of execution. The timer stopped at 13 minutes and 41 seconds, 56 seconds faster than Webb's record and nearly a full minute ahead of the previous facility record. The assembled crowd erupted in shocked applause, their disbelief giving way to recognition that they had witnessed something truly exceptional. Maya crossed the finish line and immediately assumed a position of attention, her breathing controlled despite the intensity of her effort. She had not just completed the obstacle course. She had dominated it in ways that redefined what was possible. Her performance had been so superior that it forced everyone present to question their assumptions about physical requirements and technical capability. Rodriguez stared at his stopwatch as if it were malfunctioning, unable to process the time he had recorded. Webb, whose own record had stood for less than an hour, shook his head in amazement. The instructors who had expected Maya to struggle with the course found themselves witnesses to the most exceptional performance in the facility's history. 13 minutes and 41 seconds, Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying genuine awe. New facility record by a margin of 56 seconds. The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Maya had not just broken the course record. She had shattered it by a margin that suggested fundamental superiority of technique and approach. Her performance forced everyone present to reconsider what they thought they knew about physical capability and tactical execution. Dr. Hawkins frantically scribbled notes on her clipboard, documenting what was clearly an exceptional psychological profile in action. Maya's performance demonstrated the kind of mental toughness and technical mastery that defined elite operators, but executed by someone who physically shouldn't have been able to dominate challenges designed for much larger candidates. Thompson approached Maya with an expression that mixed respect with confusion. "Chen, that was the most technically perfect obstacle course run I've seen in 15 years of instruction. Your technique was absolutely flawless." The praise was unprecedented coming from Thompson, whose criticism had been relentless since Maya's arrival. But her performance had been so exceptional that even her harshest critics were forced to acknowledge excellence that could not be dismissed or minimized. Williams gathered the remaining candidates for the post-evolution debrief. But the focus had clearly shifted to Maya's record-setting performance. Her success had redefined the standards for the course and demonstrated that technical superiority could overcome significant physical disadvantages. Chen's performance today demonstrates what happens when exceptional preparation meets natural ability, Williams announced to the group. Her technique was textbook perfect, and her mental approach was exactly what we expect from elite operators. Maya maintained her composed bearing, but internally she felt a satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. She had proven that her place in the program was earned through capability rather than accommodation, that her approach to challenges could not only match but exceed the performance of physically superior candidates. The remaining candidates looked at Maya with expressions ranging from admiration to bewilderment. Her performance had forced them to question their own approaches and consider whether raw strength was truly the most important factor in operational success. Some began asking her for technical advice, recognizing that her methods might improve their own performance. As the group prepared to move to the next evolution, Maya could feel the dynamics shifting around her in fundamental ways. The instructors who had been skeptical were now curious about her training methods. The candidates who had been dismissive were now respectful of her demonstrated capabilities. The entire atmosphere of the program had changed in response to her exceptional performance. Rodriguez pulled Maya aside as the group prepared to transition to the next training phase. "Chen, that performance was beyond exceptional. You've demonstrated the kind of technical mastery we expect from experienced operators, not candidates in their first week of training." His words carried weight beyond simple praise. Maya had proven that her approach to challenges was not just effective but superior, that her methods represented a level of preparation and capability that exceeded normal expectations. She had earned a place among the program's top performers through undeniable demonstration of excellence. But even as Maya savored the recognition, she understood that exceptional performance came with increased expectations and intensified scrutiny. Her record-setting run had established a new standard that she would be expected to maintain across all future challenges. Every evolution would now be measured against the benchmark she had established. The obstacle course had been more than just a test of physical capability. It had been a demonstration that preconceived notions about requirements could be challenged by superior technique and mental approach. Maya had proven that excellence could take different forms, and that the most capable operator might not always be the one who looked the part. As Class 247 moved toward their next challenge, Maya walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had proven herself beyond question. Her critics were silenced, her place in the program secured through demonstrated excellence that could not be dismissed. She had not just survived the challenge. She had redefined what was possible and established herself as the standard by which others would be measured. The graduation ceremony at Naval Special Warfare Command buzzed with unprecedented energy as Class 247 prepared for their final evaluation. Only 12 candidates remained from the original 23, and Maya Chen stood among them as the undisputed champion of every evolution. Her performance had been so consistently exceptional that instructors now used her techniques as teaching examples for future classes. Admiral Rebecca Sterling, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, arrived by helicopter as the ceremony preparations reached their climax. Her presence at a graduation was unusual, reserved only for classes that had produced extraordinary results or historical significance. Today would mark both. Chief Rodriguez gathered the graduating candidates for their final briefing, his demeanor markedly different from the hostility that had characterized the early weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, you have completed the most challenging military training program in the world. You are now qualified to wear the trident and serve as Navy SEALs. As Rodriguez spoke, a second helicopter landed on the facility's helipad. From it emerged General Patricia Chen, Maya's mother, wearing the dress uniform of an Army Surgeon General with ribbons that told the story of 3 decades saving lives in combat zones. Behind her walked Colonel James Chen, Maya's father, his Ranger tab and Special Forces qualifications, immediately recognizable to every instructor present. Thompson's face went pale as he recognized the significance of the arrivals. Dr. Linda Chun was not just a trauma surgeon. She was the military's leading expert on combat medicine and had personally saved hundreds of special operations personnel during her deployments. Colonel Chun's reputation in the special operations community was legendary. His innovations in small unit tactics still taught at military academies worldwide. Admiral Sterling approached the microphone with a file folder that would change everything. The assembled crowd thought they knew about Maya Chun. Before we proceed with this graduation, there are some facts about candidate Chun that need to be shared with this assembly. Maya stood at attention, her expression revealing nothing as her true background was about to be exposed to the people who had doubted her for months. Candidate Chen did not arrive at this program as an unknown quantity, Sterling announced. She is the daughter of 2 of our military's most decorated special operations veterans. More significantly, she holds advanced degrees in biomechanics and exercise physiology from Stanford University, where she spent 4 years developing optimization techniques for elite athlete performance. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled instructors and candidates. Maya had not been an underdog stumbling through training. She had been a highly educated specialist applying scientific principles to military challenges. Sterling continued, her voice carrying across the silent assembly. For the past 3 years, candidate Chun has been working with DARPA on Project Nexus, a classified program designed to optimize human performance in extreme environments. Her training methods, which many of you witnessed during this program, represent cutting-edge applications of sports science to military operations. Williams stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Ma'am, we were not informed of the candidate's background or qualifications. We treated her as a standard applicant." "Exactly as intended," Sterling replied sharply. "This program was designed to test whether advanced preparation and scientific methodology could overcome traditional physical limitations in special operations selection." Candidate Chun volunteered to serve as the test subject, knowing she would face prejudice and doubt based solely on her appearance. The Admiral opened Maya's file and began reading accomplishments that redefined everything the audience thought they knew. Champion rock climber with multiple national titles, master-level certifications in underwater operations, winter warfare, and high-altitude mountaineering. Consultant to Olympic training programs in 3 different sports. Rodriguez felt his worldview crumbling as Sterling continued. Most significantly, candidate Chen designed and executed her own preparation program using methods that are now being adopted by special operations forces worldwide. Her record-breaking performances were not accidents. They were the result of scientific optimization meeting exceptional natural ability. Thompson realized that every criticism he had leveled at Maya had been based on assumptions that were completely wrong. She had not been struggling to meet standards. She had been operating at levels that exceeded anything the program had previously seen. Maya's mother approached the podium, her medical expertise lending additional weight to the revelation. "My Daughter's approach to this training incorporated principles of biomechanics, exercise physiology, and sports psychology that represent the future of elite military preparation. She didn't just complete your program, she revolutionized it. Colonel Chen addressed the instructors directly, his voice carrying the authority of decades in special operations. Every technique Maya demonstrated, every innovation she introduced, every record she broke was the result of scientific methodology applied to military challenges. She proved that intelligence and preparation can overcome any physical disadvantage. The assembled candidates stared at Maya with new understanding. Her quiet confidence had not been bravado. It had been the assurance of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of achieving. Her technical superiority had not been natural talent. It had been the application of advanced scientific principles to military training. Admiral Sterling moved to the climax of her revelation. Candidate Chen's performance in this program has been so exceptional that she has been selected for immediate assignment to SEAL Team 6, where she will serve as both an operator and a training specialist, teaching her methods to the military's most elite personnel. The announcement represented the highest possible achievement for a new SEAL graduate. Team 6 assignments were typically reserved for operators with years of experience and proven combat performance. Maya's selection indicated that her capabilities were viewed as immediately applicable at the highest levels of special operations. Rodriguez approached Maya with an expression of profound respect mixed with embarrassment. "Chen, your performance was beyond anything we've seen in decades of training. We apologize for any treatment that was based on incorrect assumptions about your background or capabilities." Maya's response was gracious but firm. "Chief, the training was exactly what it needed to be. Facing doubt and prejudice made me stronger, and proved that these methods work even under the most challenging psychological conditions." Thompson stepped forward, his earlier hostility replaced by genuine admiration. "Ma'am, would you be willing to work with our instruction staff to incorporate your techniques into the standard curriculum? Your methods could revolutionize how we prepare future SEALs." "That's exactly the plan," Maya replied. "This program was as much about testing training methodologies as it was about my individual performance. The goal is to help everyone achieve higher levels of capability." As the ceremony concluded and Maya received her trident, the symbol of SEAL qualification, the assembled crowd understood they had witnessed something historic. She had not just become the first woman to complete SEAL training. She had redefined what was possible through the application of scientific methodology to military challenges. Williams approached Maya after the formal ceremony, his demeanor completely transformed. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. Your performance forced us to question everything we thought we knew about physical requirements and training effectiveness." Maya's response reflected the grace and professionalism that had characterized her entire journey. "Chief, questioning assumptions is how we improve. This program proved that excellence can take many forms, and that the most effective operator might not always be the one who looks the part." The other graduates gathered around Maya, eager to learn the techniques that had enabled her record-setting performances. What had begun as skepticism and hostility had transformed into respect and curiosity about methods that could enhance everyone's capabilities. Admiral Sterling concluded the ceremony with words that would reshape military training doctrine. "Today we've seen proof that the future of special operations lies not just in physical capability, but in the intelligent application of scientific principles to human performance optimization." Petty Officer Chen has shown us that path forward. As the ceremony ended and families gathered to celebrate their graduates, Maya stood with her parents. Having proven that sometimes the most revolutionary advances come from those who are underestimated, she had not just broken barriers. She had demonstrated that excellence could redefine entire systems, and that the greatest strength often lay in proving that preconceived limitations were simply challenges waiting to be overcome. The doubt, The criticism and the skepticism had all served to make her stronger and her eventual success more meaningful. Maya Chen had become the first female Navy SEAL not through accommodation or lowered standards, but through demonstrating capabilities that exceeded anything the program had previously seen. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.